Hello everybody and welcome to this week's edition of the Rebel Wide Ball. And as usual, before we talk about any sporting matters, I suppose we have to look back at events that happened during the week. And when we spoke this time last week, it was all about the election of the Bannister to the White House. And, we expressed the view that Donald would be shown the door, and seemingly, well, I was going to say that what appears to have happened, but Donald is a bit like one of these reluctant tenants. He doesn't want to leave in a hurry. But anyway, Joe Biden seemingly will be the next president of the United States of America. And by all accounts, it's a good story for Ireland. He has a good understanding of the Belfast Agreement, and also, of course, an understanding of what Brexit means to this country. And I'm sure the Buckle across the pond, Boris, would obviously prefer if his mate was left in the White House. And do you know something? Aside from all of that, I think it's good that, dominant individuals, shouldn't be the role models for society. But anyway, Joe's in there, and, we look forward to see how he's going to get on. And, the people of Ballinan, County Mayo, and over in Louth, and some people might even say that he has relations in Duhallow. He may come to this country sometime in the future. Micheál Martin, by all accounts, I did chat with him during the week, and he seemed to be very pleased with that discussion, and as well as the usual matters that come up in these talks. I presume he had a few words about the G, and he might have even asked him where Mark Keane came from last week. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on. Leo survived the vote of no confidence in him, and I would imagine if you were a strategist with Sinn Féin, you would have been better advised to forget about all that. It was a bit of a disaster from their point of view. I don't know what they were doing anyway in the first place, and as far as I could see, it allowed, I was going to say the opposition, but those supporting Leo, to shine a light on some of the affairs that may not be going that well for Sinn Féin themselves. There was the COVID subsidies. And when you hear any reference to Father Ted and funds resting in accounts, you can be sure that that doesn't spell good news. And of course, in the north where Sinn Féin are in government, there's serious hassle up there, and it took 4 days to come up with some sort of an agreement where they'd extend the restrictions. I mean, there are problems up there in terms of the number of deaths and the number of cases. And so I think that Sinn Féin would have been better advised last week to forget about all of that and get on with it. It was a waste of time and a waste of considerable money as well. Other news, of course, was the arrival of the vaccine, or at least the story that Pfizer's, amazing, isn't it, company in Cork, a huge role in this. And I know there's a lot of concerns. How did they, get a vaccine so quickly? I think the last vaccine, it took 4 years to come into play. But, the stories coming out, or the stories that were being told, is that this is really safe and it's going to be good and it's going to come into play. And when you hear situations where they know already how many doses, and I think you've got to take two, how many doses are going to be allocated to this country and other country in Europe, you have to take some confidence in that the vaccine is around the corner. The other story that grabbed the attention during the week, of course, was the boys with the wigs were at each other. And of course, when you think of judges and solicitors, you don't normally associate them with having rows in public, stuff like that, or for the lesser folk. Well, anyway, Frank Clark, who is, the Chief Justice, seemingly has, told Seamus Wolfe, he was the guy that was involved in that bit of golfing, that he should pack his bags and go. It would appear that Seamus Wolfe doesn't appear to agree with that assessment of the situation, and of course is now moved into the Oireachtas. And it would appear that so far all the parliamentarians are keeping their powder dry in this, and it's kind of an awkward and a tricky one for the government, but maybe a little bit of diversion if nothing else. But what a week it was, or what a week, I suppose, starting with last Sunday, the incredible result in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, where Cork, after 8 years of trying, and somebody said you don't beat Cork 8 years in a row, they finally got over the line against Kerry. It was tight in the end, and an amazing situation where Mark Keane, and before we come back to Mark, obviously nobody thought the Cork were going to win this one. I haven't seen one pundit that thought Cork would win. Remember our own chat here last week? We did say though that if Cork went long with kickouts, and they did, and if they put one or two fast players on some of the Kerry Dangermen, and that worked out, that worked out to a degree. But look, Kerry had more chances, they had more wides. Maybe they should have won the match. But let's give serious credit to this Cork team. I mean, judging by some of the responses from some of my good friends across the county bounds, you swear to God that they were beaten by Kilkenny or maybe Leitrim or some lesser county like that. You can't benefit from a will unless you're alive. And by God, when it came down to the opening of the will at the very end, Cork were very much alive, and they deserve absolutely great credit. I know that, some of the pundits here in Cork that operate the smart aleck role in life, they were saying when the team was named last week, I think it was maybe named last Thursday night, that some of them felt that it was a dummy team. And of course, I know that some of the people, I know that they were referring to people like Maurice Shanley at full back, Sean Meehan at centre back, and a few others. And my God, those two players, what outstanding matches they had. And it was a real dogged display by Cork, but they stayed in there. They never gave up the ghost. And look, no matter what county you come from, you've got to be happy for people that try and promote Gaelic football in this county. It's not an easy job at times, and there are GA folk, unfortunately, in this county who prefer if it was otherwise. I remember one time walking out of what was it? It was the Hartig Cup, the time that the Munster Colleges B final and the Hartig Cup were contested by four Cork schools. And I remember being walking out of Páirc Uí Chaoimh and I met an individual who had a high enough job in terms of administration of youth affairs in Cork, and I kind of said to him, look, just want to be great if there was a day like this where it was Cork football teams were involved in Munster schools competitions. And he kind of turned to me and said, Paddy, it's grand the way it is. And of course they thought that. But well done to those people who have now put in place, I think, structures that will ensure that Cork football gets a fair crack at the whip, and that there's a succession policy in place for people to be put in charge of teams, and it's not going to be a case where Johnny Murphy will get the job because no one else wanted it. And for Ronan McCarthy and Cian O'Neill and those people, Gary O'Halloran and many more, they deserve their day in the sun. And you have players like Rory Dean, Mark Collins. My God, how long have they been around, the Hurley brothers? I could name so many of them that have been much maligned. What about Shawnee Porter? An incredible young man in every sense of the word. He could have played any sport. His on-field intelligence, his commitment, his athleticism, his strength. But he's gone through so much injury, and he still stayed at it because he wanted to play Gaelic football from Cork. And isn't that what a role model for other Cork players? So, be honest with you, I thought it was an absolutely great result for Cork. Obviously, for the Kerry folk, they will come again. And, you can talk about their defensive system. Maybe they shouldn't have gone with that. Or they missed a few chances. But I tell you, it was, and the gas thing about it was that there was more Cork people saw this Cork football team because of two reasons: COVID, and because it was absolutely lashing out of the heavens. Do you think fellas would have sat in front of the television last week to watch the Cork footballers play, except they couldn't have gone on their country walks to inhale the fresh air? No, they had to sit down. And by the time it came to the last kick of the game, there was over 500,000 viewers tuned in. When that ball came in from Luke, I remember Sean Meehan, it was the guy that made the run. Young man from Kishgame, father from Clare, his mother, a cousin of Denny Cullity's, moved up the field, went through a checkpoint manned by two or three Kerry men, and kept going, gave a pass, took it back, and gave it to the mighty Luke. Luke can do anything any day of the week. He'd have cut off it, and it arrived into the biggest man around the place, and even have to jump into his chest. He dropped the foot the back of the net. What a great goal. And now the All-Ireland Series this weekend, we have Galway playing Mayo. Cork must play Tipperary now. And of course, after last week whereby Collingwood released Mark Keane, it would appear now today that the Sydney Swans have released Colin O'Riordan to play with Tipperary. So Cork and Tipperary, believe me, I've seen enough of these matches, and so have you. Tip are a fair old side, and they'll cause problems in Cork. But like, we'll talk about that next week. But Galway play Mayo this weekend, and all I can say about it, it'll be entertaining. It'll be a good match. They're two even match sides, and I don't know which one is going to win it. A couple of weeks ago, Galway would have been, Mayo wouldn't have even been in town, but Mayo have changed their team considerably. There's so many young fellas playing now with them. And then up in Ulster, where you have the two semi-finals down for decision. Donegal playing Armagh. That'll be, a tough enough game, but Donegal will be the favourites there, and the other one down will be playing Cavan in that semi-final. And in Leinster, sure, look, Dublin are going to be winning it, but anyway, this weekend they're going to be playing Laois. There'll be one Kerryman on the sideline. Mikey Quirk is in charge of Laois, and in the other semi-final, Jack O'Connor will be in charge of Kildare against Meath, who are slowly but slowly getting there in Leinster. As I said before, the Leinster Championship is an awesome championship. The only pity about it is the Dublin are in town. So, it's absolutely great matches ahead. What about the Cork hurlers? Back in town again. And, it was last week. It was a great result for them against Dublin, even though I think I've said it a few times, I'm not too sure how so many people think the Dublin are a top side. I know there's great people doing good work there, as there is with every county team, but no, they're not at this level. And in fairness, the Cork management, they made a couple of changes, and they might change them again this weekend, like Colm Spillane came in full back, and he comes from down there in East Cork. He's a hardy buck, and he laid into a few guys. I know he maybe got a free given against him, but he looks the part in there at full back. His father was, I saw him playing football on a few occasions for me, Killy. So I'd say this guy is no shrinking violet. Robbie O'Flynn, who was outstanding for Erin's Own, and doesn't show you that, the great thing about playing the county championship, that's when we saw him in his best. Last week, absolutely flying at wing forward. He made a big... Luke Meade came in, the new Stoneman. Bit of an unsung hero, I think, this guy at times. And because he's an outstanding link player, Luke will never be top of the scoring chats. Picking up ball, laying it in. And then Jack O'Connor up at corner forward from SARS. And, he was involved in that great run that sent the ball into Dickie Dalton. And, maybe Dickie's never going to be a permanent full forward for Cork, but he's some operator, and he's a tough cookie as well. Won a bit of possession and got the all-important goal. They play Tipperary this weekend, and I know this is where consistency comes into town. They play Thurles on Saturday. That's the 4 o'clock game. And of course, Tipperary, we've nearly forgotten that they're the All-Ireland champions. Are they as good as they were? Well, I'm not too sure. That John Bubbles O'Dwyer, who was very good for them, they managed him well last year. I don't know how well he's playing. Of course, Paddy Maher, one of the greatest we've ever seen, seems to be suffering from an injury. And I think that, I do think that Cork will get there. And of course, we hope they do. So it will be interesting, that match. And then the other game in the qualifiers is Clare versus Wexford. And of course, that's Brian Lohan versus Davy Fitz, which that's only a small part of it. They played for Clare, one in goal, the other full back. Did somebody tell me that they're not in great terms now? But we'll come down to the players and on the pitch. And look, I think Wexford will win that. And that Clare, they're coping with the loss of Peter Duggan and John Conlon, and they're seriously important players. They're out injured, I think, both of them. I know they've Tony Kelly. He's their main go-to player, and Lee Chin for Wexford, a great hurler as well. So it'll be an interesting match, but I think Wexford will be the team that will get there. And then we have the two provincial championships. You have Kilkenny versus Galway. Or not Kilkenny, my apologies. It is Kilkenny versus Galway. Try to get about it. Kilkenny versus Galway and Leinster. And, the Galway team that won the All-Ireland a couple of years ago, they seem to be, flying this year. And Kilkenny had... I'm not saying there's an over-reliance on TJ Reid. What a great player, and we're privileged to be able to see him in action. And, Ricky, I'd be going for Galway there. And, of course, then you have the other one in Leinster, and that's in Munster. that game in Simple Stadium on Sunday, and that's obviously Watford, who, you know, they did a great win over Cork. Liam Cahill is their manager. He's getting a lot of credit for it. And, you know, Will Tadhg de Búrca, who plays a kind of a Luke Mead role for them, insofar as that he is probably the best of these so-called, you know, extra defenders. Jack Fagan and Meadman will line out at centre forward for them. And of course, you have Desi Hutchinson, who, by the way, probably if he stayed playing soccer with Brighton Hove Albion, would be playing later on tonight for Ireland against England. But he came back to play hurling and absolutely nothing wrong with that. He's, you know, he's an important player for Watford now. And I said before, they're such a small county. Like, it's absolutely wonderful that they have an opportunity to play in the Munster final. But I suppose you can't look beyond Limerick. Most people have them on the betting slips. By the way, there was some betting slips went out the door last Sunday evening when Mark Keane found the back of the net. But anyway, like this Limerick team, like they're, you know, that half hour that they have of Kyle Hayes, Tom Morrissey, and Garrett Hegarty, they've been the dominant side. Normally half back lines maybe, but this half forward line, I know Dearborn Burns back at right half back is going to be influential for them as well. Yeah, look, I can't see beyond Limerick in that one. It's a big weekend for the Cork Camogie team in particular. They were beaten last week by Galway. I think that was expected. Galway are a very good side. But an interesting thing about that match, I think it was 15 points to 12 or something, but Rebecca Hindley, she pointed two sideline cuts from left and right hand side of the pitch. And there's 2 points now for a sideline cut that goes over the bar in Camogie. I'd forgotten about that rule. Jeez, I think this could make a big difference. Like, I mean, if you have somebody that can strike these. And, you know, it made the difference the last day. But anyway, the Cork, I don't think they were too disappointed. Maybe I'm not saying they, you know, they went up there to be beaten, far from it. But, you know, they have a young team. Yeah, I mentioned the Corsi Rovers Brigade before to you that, you know, you have Linda Collins and Fiona Keating and Saoirse McCarthy. And, you know, players like Amy O'Connor, of course, Orla Cronin, you know, will be their main scorer in terms of free. And Aisling Thompson is out around the midfield, and Chloe Sigerson. So I expect them to get over Clare. They play them at Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Saturday at 1 o'clock. And in the other quarter-final, I expect Tipperary to beat Waterford. The Cork ladies footballers, until you had there's some battle last week, a goal in them at the end. And was it Saoirse Noonan's goal? I wonder. That was important, and what a day it was. What a weekend it was for this girl. She plays Gaelic football for Nemo Rangers, soccer for Cork City, and got 2 goals in the semi-final of the Cup on Sunday, and she got selected on the Irish team, who's, you know, that a team that's doing reasonably well. They travelled to Borough on Sunday at 1 o'clock to play Cavan. You know, to be an absolutely major shock if they didn't beat Cavan. I expect them to do that. So you know, the bottom line is I expect the Cork Camogie team to beat Clare and qualify for the semi-final, and I think the Cork ladies football team to do the very same thing and qualify for the semi-final of their championship. Then we'll have maybe a bit of an issue with dual players, but look, that bridge can be crossed when they come to it. I'm just thinking of Patrick Keane, and what a tough week it was for him. And then, you know, he went for a walk up Carrantoul and suffered an injury. Thankfully he's all right, but he told a story once about that his father was teaching him how to drive, and he was a bit concerned about, you know, some big bridge that was coming up, and the father said, look, wait till you get there, there's a lot of small turns on the road. I wonder, did that come back to bite him last Sunday? The big bridge was Dublin, the small turn on the road was Cork. So the same here with the Cork ladies footballers in Camogie. Let them get over their games this weekend first. In terms, I mentioned the soccer earlier on, and later on tonight that friendly be starting shortly against England. I think they've met 6 times in the past 25 years, 4 draws, 1-1 and 2 nil-all draws. So will it be the same tonight? Or yeah, and this Irish team still to get a win under Stephen Kenny, and you know, it's a friendly game. They've lost a couple of players. Callum Robinson is out through with COVID issues, and of course Adam Connolly got injured as well, and David McGoldrick retired. whether Jack Grealish plays for England or not, I don't know. You know, some of you would be into that scenario. Himself and Declan Rice were Irish players in the past and declared for England. Jack Grealish played in Croke Park. I think his grandmother was a Foley lady from Sneem in County Kerry, from what I can gather. So anyway, look, that game is on. It's not the biggest game in the world, but it's a game against England. And, you know, and talk about a change in terms of, you know, ladies sports, but Katie Taylor is staying in the same hotel as the Irish team, and I think I'm not saying they were wanting to get her autograph, but an Irish professional soccer player, you know, Katie Taylor is such I suppose, an outstanding athlete in this country now, and she's defending her lightweight title this weekend, and she came across some of the Irish team during the week. So yeah, that's interesting from the perspective of you know, that Ireland and England game. In terms of rugby, and after the disappointment of their game against France, the rugby fraternity now are back with another competition. This, you know, normally they had the Guinness Autumn Internationals, they were known as. By the way, like if the GA took a pound from a brewery, there'd be mayhem, but it's okay. Like if there's rugby, they can do things like that. But anyway, that's another story. This competition, there's 8 teams in it, this Autumn Nations Cup. There's 2 groups. 4 in each group, so they play 3 matches. And the interesting thing, there's somebody for everybody in the audience here. The way it works is the top 2 teams play each other. When it's all over, the second 2 will play each other, the third 2, and I think the bottom team even plays each other. Ireland are a group with England, Wales, and Georgia, and such as the dominance of Leinster. I think there's 11 Leinster players named in the matchday panel, and James Lowe becomes the latest project player. He's the 11th player now that will be capped for Ireland. By the way, they're playing Wales tomorrow evening. He's the 11th player to be capped in this project situation. And I'm not too sure that should be happening, to be honest with you. But look, as well as who am I to be arguing with the people that know more about this than I do, but I do think it kind of devalues the Irish jersey a bit, was always worn. And I'm not saying that these people are not committed Irishmen, but they weren't born here, and the rule has changed a bit. So you only have to stay here 3 years now. And I think some of the bargain tools that the Irish you were making for some of these players is they tell them, look, you pick up an Irish Ganzi if you hang around the place for 3 times for 3 years. So finally, then it's the weekend of the US Masters and the Green Jacket and Butler's Cabin and all of that. And of course, Rory McIlroy, this is the only one that, the only major that he hasn't won. So it's a big weekend for him, and of course a big weekend for all of the golfers take part in this. And of course, there'll be a huge Irish following, you know, the Masters for people that follow golf. And for the young man, James Shugro, he's out there, he'll be playing. And there was a photograph of him shown earlier on, himself and Tiger Woods. You know, Woods is a big man, so big photograph, but I would imagine that most people in Cork would prefer if they could see a photograph of himself and Matty Taylor, who was another one of those stars for Cork last Sunday. Matty isn't as tall as Tiger Woods. Probably not the only difference between himself and Tiger, but I think most people would like to see a photograph of James Shugro, because Shugrove, he was down around Sneem. James Shugro and Matty with the Sam Maguire. Is that too much to expect? Well, maybe for another time we can go back to it. So yeah, thanks for listening and for watching, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.